And then when I was 6 years old, everything changed one day. And all the children who were 3 or older, and I was 6, and I had a sister that was 4 and a brother that was 3, we were separated from our parents, and we were put into one house where it was like a dormitory, and we no longer were raised by our parents.
Oh, that it just the thought of that is traumatic. So, do you remember that day? Do you remember being separated
Very,
from?
very, very
Oh,
well.
Welcome to Out of the Box with Christine. Are you willing to step into your greatness? Are you ready to shine? Well, get ready, Truth Seeker. You're in for an amazing ride. And now, here's the host of the show, Christine Blosdale.
hello, everyone. Welcome back to Out of the Box with Christine. I'm your host, Christine Blosdale. I am a business and success coach in multimedia. That means I take entrepreneurs and I get them out in the world through podcasts, publishing, videos, TikToks, all those good things. And today I am very, very happy to introduce to you someone very, very special. I want you to just sit back, maybe close your eyes, unless you're driving a car, don't close your eyes, but just imagine being a 17-year-old girl, American girl, who has never read a newspaper, never watched television, never seen a movie, or even made a phone call. A 17-year-old girl who has never even danced. And this is in the 1960s, all right? Then imagine that 17-year-old girl being banished from the community she knows, her home, and now she faces the world alone, without skills, without family, without money, but empowered with faith and a fierce determination to succeed on her own, which she actually does, rising eventually to the upper echelons of the world of finance and investing. This young girl, who is now a very successful woman, and my guest today is Patricia Walsh Chadwick. She's the author of Little Sister, a memoir, and Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. And Patricia, first of all, as a media coach, I give you an A++ on especially the title, Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. That just has a movie written all over it. So congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Christine, for having me.
So my question is, who's going to play you in the film?
Well, I used to think of a variety of people, but we've been a little bit working on this for a few years. So everybody's trying to get old, but I have different phases, as you say. I was a child, then I was mid, and now I am what I am today.
I'm thinking there's an actress. She's actually a Broadway star, Lupino.
Oh, yeah, I Lupino, but also Saoirse Ronan.
I don't know that.
I thought, oh, she's wonderful. She's very Irish, so we kind of look.
Okay.
They're like,
yeah, Lupino. You'd have to change a few things, but I just her personality is just so brilliant. But anyway, I digress. So, so you've got to, I can't imagine, your life, but it started in a very unusual space, right? Not like your average nuclear home where everybody's, the Leave It to Beaver sort of situation. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up and where you grew up in, was it Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, Massachusetts. I was born in Cambridge, so a pretty cosmopolitan and intellectual city.
Yes.
And in fact, my parents were well educated. But my earliest memories were really being part of a community, of an organization that to me was the only thing I knew. And I thought I had the best childhood. I was living with my parents, and I was the oldest of what would turn out to be 5 children. And every single day, there were these 60 adult people who were my equivalent of aunts and uncles. We all ate together. we went to mass together, but I assume by the time I was 3, I knew that we were doing it in secret. There were people from Lebanon, Italy, Russia, Spain. They had classes, and it was very, very Catholic. I mean, so Catholic, we actually got excommunicated eventually. But it was, to me, there was somebody ready to take my hand every single day, walk me down to the Charles River, pick daisies with me, read me a book, answer any questions that I had. And they were young. I mean, to me, they were very grown up, but they were in their 20s. And they were all part of this little community that took basically a religious vow to obey the priest that founded this religious order. And that would come back to us. Yes.
Red flag. Okay, go ahead.
Red flag. Yes.
So,
but it was a beautiful environment. And I remember my baby sister being born. I remembered all this, and we lived together as a family. We all dressed alike. And we lived behind this big red fence, so the evils of the outside world would not come in. And then when I was 6 years old, everything changed one day. And all the children who were 3 or older, and I was 6, and I had a sister that was 4 and a brother that was 3, we were separated from our parents, and we were put into one house where it was like a dormitory, and we no longer were raised by our parents.
oh, just the thought of that is traumatic. So, do you remember that day? Do you remember being separated from?
Very well. Very well, because the apartment that my family had, we were in a 3-family house, and we were on the top floor. And the Maloufs, he was a professor of philosophy from Lebanon. He and his 5 children lived on the 2nd floor, and Charlie Awaskio and his wife and his 4 children, he was a professor of physics, lived on the 1st floor. And all of a sudden that day, my parents were moved out. The Maloufs, the Awaskios were moved out, and the top 2 floors were for the girls, and the bottom floor was for the boys. So the apartment that was my home, I came in that night, and it was just beds. And everything that was part of my family was gone.
I can't even imagine how you dealt with that at being you were 6?
Yes, but in a crazy way, I had a younger sister, 4. And I worried about her because I was a pretty bold and energetic girl. I was always in trouble, but only silly child's trouble. And I worried about her because I could see she was scared. So in a certain way, almost instantaneously, I adopted a new role, which was to watch out for her.
Almost as mother.
Yes.
At 6.
At 6.
Jeez.
And she would, over the next few years, she would go through these periods where she wouldn't eat at all, for which she was punished. And so they would bring her breakfast back for lunch. How can you eat that? And then they would bring it back for dinner. And so sometimes when I was nervous for her, I would just grab her bowl of food and eat it. So the bowl would be empty.
Right. Wow. So you're there, and at 6, I mean, from the introduction here, I was talking about at around the age of 17, you were excommunicated from that community. Right. So from 6 to 17, what was your life like?
Again, it was the same community. And for 3 years, we continued to live in Cambridge. And then we moved out to about 30 miles west of Boston to a wonderful little town called Harvard. And we lived in a hamlet called Still River. And in one way, it was fantastic because suddenly we had, 20 acres of land, and we started farming, and we had chickens and cows and horses and all that kind of thing. But simultaneously, we started to live a completely monastic life. So there was silence all day long.
Oh.
You could not even say hello to your parents. And So I was torn. I loved, and there's a certain point when you are forced into a particular regimen, you learn to live with it. And my father, whom I will thank for in my entire life, he broke the rules, and he would find me on my birthday. For instance, we didn't celebrate birthdays, and he would just find me and whisper, "Happy birthday, my little princess." And he had 4 daughters, and everyone was my little princess. And if he was the one, very intellectual man, mathematician, philosopher, and he was assigned to fixing the cars. And that's how I came eventually to understand that it really was a cult, because everybody's specialty, everybody's education was turned on its head to control them, and they had to do other things. But what I loved about my father fixing the cars was that he did it outside. And so I went by half a dozen times a day. I would go from one house to the other, and there I would see him. And he would be under the hood of the car, and he would just wiggle his little finger at me like that. And that was his way of saying hello. And I will tell you, that was the glue that just held me together till, every 3 or 4 months, we were allowed to have 45 minutes with our parents. And
was that 45 minutes, was that monitored?
Yes, of course it was monitored.
Oh my gosh. Were you able to speak then or no?
Oh yes, we could speak during that time, but all you ever would tell them was the good things that happened.
Right.
Nothing about the meetings, nothing about anything because I didn't want them to be unhappy. And 2, I thought this is our only time
together
to be happy with them. Yeah.
So you made mention of the beat, and I'm thinking that any place that has absolute control of anyone, an adult, let alone a child or children, that there is going to be abuse. It's woven in the fabric of something like that. Do you feel comfortable talking about any of that abuse that happened?
Yes, it was not sexual abuse. And there may have been a case or 2, but no, but the abuse, there's a certain thing when people are beating children up, you just wonder, are they getting pleasure out of this? What makes them do that? And so, there were some children that just got beaten every day. And how anybody could find in themselves to do that, I have no idea. And some of these people were actually parents.
But was it a way just to control, like also psychologically control children?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
To keep them in line, right.
But some children, you can't scare them into doing things. And, they know what's going to come, and they still do what they choose to do.
The resilience of all those children. How many children would you say were there?
There were 39 children and 60 adults.
Have you been able to, since your escape, have you been able to meet up with them, or is there just no contact?
Oh, no. Very, very much so. In fact, I was very fearful writing my first book because I decided it was very important for me to tell only my own story and not to tell anyone else's in case they did not want it shared. And there were some children who had become really estranged from others of us because the whole experience was so damaging to them that they just felt, I can't even be connected. And so I was very anxious that my story would be upsetting to them. And the opposite was true. I got emails from people saying, thank you so much. Now I feel I can talk about this. Wow.
Yeah, because you were brave enough, and also because you were after leaving, and again having no skills, no money, no nothing, you had this determination to succeed in life, and probably that Leo fire.
Absolutely.
Right. So it wasn't like you were just just kind of hanging out in the world and going, well, might as well write this book. You were also quite successful in the world of finance and investing at that time. So that was also a bit brave as well.
Yes, well, as I had been accepted to 2 colleges when I was growing up in what we call the center. And the reason the person that ran the place, the woman, Sister Catherine, the reason she had me apply is because she was afraid that their school, our school that we were being educated in, tiny one for 39 children, might not be accredited. And there were some forces that were saying we weren't getting a good education. So she put me up to get accepted, and I got accepted at Vassar. Okay, so that was one of the 7 sisters, and that's pretty big. And then also where my father had gone to college, which is Bates College up in Maine. At that point, I had done my duty for Sister Catherine. She knew the school would be accredited, and it was. But she also made me sit down and write a letter to each school saying I would not be coming.
No.
Because she basically told me that if I went to either of the schools, and of course, who was going to pay for it? I didn't even have a penny to my name, that I would lose my soul. So therefore, when she kicked me out, she allowed as how she would pay for a secretarial program so that I could then get a job.
As a secretary.
And the first job I got was as a receptionist, but it happened to be for a brokerage firm. And I quickly made myself valuable and available and, stepped up to the plate and started getting really, really interested. And by the time I was 21, I had taken the stock exchange exam and become a broker.
Yeah, girl. Yeah. So she basically used you.
Totally.
To get the accreditation and then was like, and then just snatched that away. Oh my God, there is a place in hell for this woman. Oh, I just can't imagine. But again, you were, knocked down and you're like, okay, I'll take that secretarial job and I'll take it to a different level. Right. So that began your career in the world of.
It did. And my second book, Breaking Glass, Tales of the Witch of Wall Street, is dedicated to my mentors. And for me, that is really important. And it's a very big part of my life now. But interestingly, as you might imagine, in the world of Wall Street, there were not very many women. I mean, I started out in the late 60s. So all my mentors were men. And they were wonderful, wonderful people. But when I was at the end of the book, kind of giving special credit to each of them, I thought, gosh, I thought back to my childhood, and certainly Sister Catherine was no mentor to me ever. She had ended up being a role model, I think, because she was so powerful. And, I don't seem to have been frightened by anything that was challenging. And I thought, well, the only person I ever had in my life was this woman who nobody ever said no to. But there was one person within the organization, and she was the principal of our tiny little school. And she herself had gone to Radcliffe, and her father had been a principal, and her name was Sister Anne Mary. And she could teach first grade, and she could teach 12th grade. And she could teach, trigonometry, and she could teach Latin, and she could teach spelling. And she was aware that I was leaving. They kept it a deep, dark secret from almost everybody. My parents were aware because Sister Catherine informed them that was what was going to happen, didn't ask them. But then Sister Anne Mary, when I was a senior in high school, she would call me into one of the little, we called them tutoring rooms in our little school, and she would just sit down and talk to me. Sister Catherine was basically saying I was going to hell, and when I left, she basically said that I was destroying the vocations of the men. Okay, so I had a few crushes when I was a teenager, but I mean, I knew it was so naive as to what a crush was even all about and why it happened. I knew nothing.
Teenage hormones.
She didn't even let us take biology. But Sister Anne Mary was so wonderful. She'd sit down and she'd say, darling, you are going to do very, very well. And she said, and it's because you're hardworking, you love to solve problems, and you have common sense.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
she would say sometimes, she said one time, and so remember, we didn't call our parents mom and dad or anything like that. My mother was Sister Elizabeth Ann, and my father was Brother James Aloysius. And she said to me one time, and I've never forgotten it, she said, "You have the best of Brother James Aloysius and Sister Elizabeth Ann." And it was the first time anyone had ever put me in a connection to my parents. And she knew what she was doing. She was breaking the rules and trying to help me not be too terrified. And
Yeah.
boy, and I stayed in touch with her. I went back year and year after year after year after year, all the way till about 5 years ago when she died at the age of 96. But she remembered me every single year, and we would sit and talk, and she would, I try to think I speak the King's English in terms of grammar, but she would occasionally correct my grammar, even sitting when she was 87 years old and I was, you know, 40 or something.
Wow.
Um,
So she was a little bit of that ray of hope, and also giving you, instead of beating you down, it was, you can do anything. That positive
yes,
reinforcement.
and as the head of the school, she never hit a child. She was always finding the up. And furthermore, she learned the trumpet, the trombone. I think she played the violin as a child, and she certainly played the piano, but she would give music lessons to every child that wanted them.
And music alone would be an escape as well from all of
Of
that.
course, yes, yes.
Wow. I'm telling you, this needs to be a movie. So if you're listening, any studio executives, this needs to be turned into a movie. Patricia has to pick the leading actress, though, who's going to play her. Because it's just, and isn't it amazing, the trajectory, so where you are now. So your career, it reads like, I mean, it's something that is amazing for anybody, even with all support, right? With money and backing, financial backing and all of that. It would be a huge success for somebody like yourself. But without all of that, how did you manage? Like, were you just kept working at the brokerage? It was the brokerage firm. You kept
I
working
worked at
there,
a
and then
brokerage firm,
yeah.
but then I started going to college at night because I knew so quickly I needed intellectual stimulation. And my school years through high school, I loved it. I loved history. I loved math. I loved every single thing to learn. Remember, as you say, I never went to a movie. I never went to a supermarket. I never, ate out. So to me, the only thing I could learn about the world was in books and through learning, teaching. And I did Latin and Greek and, all kinds of things that were very intellectually stimulating. But once I got out into the world, I had an opportunity to then really explore. And it didn't take me long to really love the world. And I was there in the late 60s when, there were a lot of violence and demonstrations on the Vietnam War and all of that kind of disruption. But for me, it was eye-opening. And I reveled living in Harvard Square while all of that was going on. But I also was dying to see the whole world because my childhood was all about, the stories of the saints were what we were told. Well, they came from the rolling hills of Tuscany and, where the
Right.
where the sorry, where the cedars of Lebanon grew and the Mediterranean Sea. So all of that was just part of what I wanted to explore. And I've been a world traveler for decades.
And there's such an appreciation. Well, like when you have, we've had teenagers, we have a teenager. And when you think about like, what's taken for granted, right? And with technology and all the gizmos and all of that stuff, it's sort of a given that the outside world is there, and going to see a movie is not a big deal, all those things. But for you, I could see how it was such a new, exciting thing. my question is to, do you remember any of your firsts? Do you remember your first, I don't know, your first your first meal outside, like in a restaurant? Do you remember your first movie? Or do you remember any of those firsts?
I do remember my first movie, and you're not going to believe what my first movie was that I saw.
What was
And
it?
it was in 1968, I believe. And it was A Man and a Woman.
Oh, is and that,
I
you know what?
mean,
That's the theme song that my mom and I used to like. I used to love that. I used to,
la da 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 da.
yeah.
And then the next one that I loved and probably saw 20 times was Dr. Zhivago.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. Wow. Do you, do you remember your first meal out at a restaurant?
It was with my father, who took me out for a Sunday, and we went. If this wasn't the very first, it was the first kind of experience. We went to the top of the John Hancock building in Boston, and I felt treated so specially. And because I'd never ever, I mean, yes, I'd gone to get an ice cream cone at a, whatever little dive place, but never sat down with tablecloths and stuff. But we were brought up with, impeccable table manners,
Of course.
and which is great, for which I am enormously grateful. And when you see how many people don't grow up with some of those important things,
Yeah.
and speaking English correctly, and being able to carry on a conversation, and learning to cook, and all kinds of things. There are so many things that I am grateful for in my childhood.
That's what I was, I think probably also the one of the reasons, because you're amazing, but one of the reasons that I felt compelled to have you on the show too was that it wasn't all about this was so horrible and my life sucked and blah 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 blah, but it was this level of gratefulness. And even through everything that you experienced, there was this level of gratefulness. And I understand my own issues with my own things that happened when I was a kid. When it's happening, you're like, oh shit, what what's going on? Who are you people? But then as you get older, you're like, you know what? Those experiences made me resilient, or those experiences made me an empath. So I'm able to feel others' pain and suffering and all those things. So that's what I really was just moved by, was that feeling of gratefulness, from what you experienced. So
Yes, I am enormously grateful. And I think sometimes you're hardwired for certain things. I am always able to find the good, and find, the glass can be 3/4 empty, and I think it's full. And if it's not full, I'm going to get it to full.
yes,
And, and I think I don't know if it's a grace. I do think of grace a lot. And I think grace is one of those things that we're given. And, I think I have the grace of humor and joy and gratitude and generosity. And I feel that those are such gifts. And I am immensely grateful that I was born with them.
well, I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful that you were born. I'm grateful that you're on the show. And I'm also grateful because also you believe in giving back as well.
I
And
do.
can you talk
Hold on, I
about
just lost it
about
for one
some of
second
that?
because here it is. My mouse fell on the floor.
That's all right. But about giving back, and I mean, I would want to see you speaking to, you know, I would want to see you speaking to young people, getting out the word as much as possible about that resiliency. But what are you doing right now, a bit more about giving back to the community?
Yes, I do several things. Well, about 8 years ago, I started a healthcare company here in Connecticut for the LGBTQ community. And today we are just hiring our 50th employee, 50 people. We have 2 offices. We have over 4,000 patients. And half our patients are transgender. And it is, to me, I think it's a gift to be able to be supportive and to help people who really, really know it. Most of our employees are actually members of the community. And so there is meant to be, but those that are not, and I am not, my daughter actually works there. She does all the case management, and she just got married this summer to her husband. But everybody cares, and it's all about, and she works very much with the transgender community who need to get their gender marker changes so that and now there's a huge effort because of the change in the administration. And we just want to make sure that they can get those things done before too much time passes. So that to me is one very important part of my life. Another is mentoring. And I've done a lot of mentoring, mostly to young women in middle school, and then carrying on with them into high school and college. And that to me is also a very important part. And then I love music. And so I sit on the board of the Glimmer Glass Festival and different things like that. But it really is now, at 76, I've had so many opportunities, and I really love.
You are not 76.
I am. Well, I was born in 1948, so you do.
Get out of here. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, for those of you who are listening to the podcast on your favorite platform, Apple or Spotify, you can't see my guest, but if you go to our YouTube channel, which I'll have a link in the show notes, you will see Patricia. And my goodness, whatever's in those jeans or whatever you're eating is good, because you look amazing. Absolutely.
Well, I'm kind of an orgy. And that was one of the good things about the center. Yeah, we grew up eating organic food.
Oh, yeah, but it's something else. It's not just the food. It's that spark. It's that fire. You're just like loving life, and life is loving you back.
I have energy.
Yeah, you do. You got more energy than me, and you got more energy than me when I was 20. Patricia, I've just enjoyed our conversation so much. I could go on and on and on, and you are welcome back on the show anytime. But just let our listeners actually let them know how they can find out more about you and learn about the work that you do, and support the work that you're doing as well.
So I have a website. It's a very simple one, patriciachadwick.com.
Brilliant.
And on it has, all the blogs I write. I just wrote a blog about Thanksgiving, which is about to be our big holiday. But I write on all kinds of things. I've tried to stay away this year from politics just because it's stressful. But I have all of the engagements I have are posted there. And it has my bio, and it's a very interesting point. I wonder if I shouldn't even have a link to Anchor Health, which is the company that I founded. And I
think so. I think because I think that the work that you're doing, especially as someone who is not LGBTQ plus, that says mountains about your character and the person that you are and your heart. And especially at this time, it's so critically needed. And who knew when you had started this, however long ago, that we would be where we are today. Yeah. So I'm just so grateful, that you're there and the work you do. So yes, you need to put a link in there somewhere.
I will do that. Okay. But it's basically patriciachadwick.com, and that can give you a link to buying my books. And I am going to write another book.
What's this book about? Can you tell us?
I have to work on selling this one, which I'm doing. Thank you. But it's going to be called Conversions. And the subtitle, I think, will be Aching to Disbelieve. And it's all those things that I was taught or were force-fed, and how over the decades, as they rolled out, I came to learn and understand that something was really different from what I was taught.
I like that. It's very applicable in today's world as well.
Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure, Patricia. Again, come back on the show anytime, and we'll make sure
Thank
that
you. I
we
will be in touch with you. And thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. Gosh, I feel so happy now. We'll make sure that we have a link to Patricia's website in the show notes, so you don't have to worry if you can't write that down. You can just click on that link and share this. If you were inspired by this, if you feel that someone needs to hear this, please share this with them. Don't keep it to your little selfish self. You can share it on all your different platforms. And again, just my congratulations on all the work that you're doing and your success. And when you get your new book out, then come back on the show and we'll talk
I
about
most assuredly will,
Okay.
but give me a few years.
Okay. All right.
Maybe when I'm 80.
I'll do that. And thank you, wonderful listeners, for tuning in today, and our wonderful viewers that are on YouTube. If you want more information about me and about all the different podcasts, I've got 3 podcasts now. Well, I've got 1 in development, but there's 3. If you want to learn about all those different podcasts and the books that I've written, you can go to christineblosdale.com. A link will be in the show notes. But as I always say at the end of every show, remember to think outside that damn box. Bye for now.